All right. Now, welcome. We're here today with Anne-Marie Charrett. She's a tester, trainer, coach, and a keynote speaker here at the Agile Testing Days, aka the Badass Tester.
I am. Marshmallow? Badass
Yes.
tester.
So thank you for having us.
Not at all.
So I would like to, go back on your presentation, solid presentation, by the way, very, very insightful. So can you maybe elaborate on the comparison you made about software testing and quality with cards?
Yeah, so often we talk about software testing being the headlights of the project, and by that it means that they're shining light on the problems ahead. So if you have a road that's got lots of obstacles, you can imagine you're driving down, you don't know where you're going, and it's really useful to have your headlights so you can avoid these obstacles. Software testing is like that too, that it's shining the light on potential problems coming up in bugs that might happen, or bugs that are going to slip up, that will get slipped up. So and we don't want those, nobody wants to have these bugs. And so the analogy of software testing being the headlights is really useful because it's providing that information to the rest of the team on the state of quality. Right. And I think that's really useful, but I like to expand on that a little bit because, it's great to have headlights, but if you're like my 15-year-old doesn't know how to drive, then headlights are pretty useless, right? Yes. And if your car is empty, you've got no petrol, then you're not going to get far with or without headlights. It doesn't make much sense. Yes. So for me, quality is the whole. It's not only the headlights. We need the whole car. We need the whole journey in order to be able to get where we want to be. We need to be able to drive. We need to be able to have a petrol. We need to know where we're going. We need to have a GPS, a navigator, and we need all these things, all these different elements to help us get to where we want to be. And that's why it's so important to look at quality in lots of different aspects rather than only in testing. So how can we look at quality in different ways? And the analogy or the thought question I like to ask is, if you didn't have software testing, how would you know you've got good quality, right? What activities would take place that would help you understand? Right. And I think that's a really useful question to ask because it starts us thinking about other things that we could possibly do, like potentially peer reviews, or understanding our stories better, or improving collaboration in our teams, or all these other sort of soft things that aren't necessarily explicitly involved with a product. They will help improve quality sort of in a different way, sort of in a less direct way, but they definitely will help improve quality. Looking at the pipeline, looking at the practices that the team have, and all these different aspects will help drive the quality of the product. And I didn't mention in the talk, but there's this concept, just for your viewers, there's this concept.
We have a premiere here.
There's this concept of emergent quality, so that the quality actually emerges from all the wonderful practices and collaborations that people do. And if you focus on those things, then your quality is going to be good, right? Yes. And I think that's something in this day and age where we have such complex systems. It's going to be hard for us to really know, be able to test the product, because the product might be an API. And how do you know, and I think it's less visible than what it used to be. It could be a service, for example. So we want to, so we want to be able to start thinking a little bit differently about how we could introduce quality in these, and how could we know that we have quality. And I think that's what I target with quality engineering.
All right. Very insightful again.
Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. So my next question is regarding, you mentioned how we Agile testers can bring value to teams or organizations. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that? How do you see it?
I think, there's lots of different ways we can have teams, right? We can bring value by actually testing. I mean, that's obviously. But I think a lot of it is that critical thinking that we can do in software testing. And the way I look at critical thinking is, asking questions about how do we know that something is what it is? What do you mean by something? How do we know we have a problem? How could we see that problem? And asking these questions that maybe people don't necessarily are used to asking.
Right.
I think as testers, we're really good at identifying potential problems. Right. We have a nose for it. We spend all our days thinking about what might go wrong.
That's our job.
That's our job.
Yes.
So let's use those skills in lots of different ways. We don't necessarily have to only focus on the product, but focus on, other things, and also focusing outside the team, offering value outside by thinking, well, maybe the system needs to be looked at as a whole, and maybe paradoxically needs to be looked at as a whole, and how can we form a team to understand the system better? Maybe we need to do some system testing at a higher level that the actual development team or this small team doesn't have the capacity to do that because they're so focused on a small piece. So I think we have lots of ways that we can mix things up. We just need a little bit of confidence that we can do that. Yes, I think we testers tend to we're very good at picking holes amongst ourselves and identifying
I can
problems.
Totally agree with that. Yes, absolutely.
So I think we have to kind of be a little more confident and see where we can add this value. And I really believe we can. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
So now we have a question from the audience. One of our viewers, he asked about what best practices. What is the best practice in a software tester, an agile software tester? Is it a dedicated tester for a Scrum or DevOps team, or that performs multiple tasks, so a T-shaped tester, or B, distribute the qualities of a tester among different teams, or C, second, test resources being seen as a complete different team, so that development teams can use this. So how would you?
Okay, I'm going to preempt all this with, first of all, I'm not a big fan of best practice.
All right.
I think there's practices for some contexts, and there's practices for other contexts, and you don't necessarily have a best practice for everything. So for example, because I had embedded testers in the teams, and we actually went from the third one, which was an independent test team, we went into put the testers into the teams. We call this embedding the testers in the teams. Okay. But but there was a couple of things that were important to us. One was to get as much information as possible. So when you have an independent test team, you have this definitely more of a formal handover process to the developer throwing it over the fence to the tester, right? Because there is more of a divide. If you have a tester in the team, the tester's listening to conversations, those quick conversations that happen that change the course of the software development, and that then they forget to tell the tester who's in another team. So it's wonderful to get the tester in there understanding the why of some of the decisions that are being made, and also providing context. Often the tester will know a lot more about the system, and they'll be able to provide context in planning and say, well, actually, no, that feature is used somewhere else as well, which the team might not actually know. So I think there's a huge value of having the tester in the team as a general in an agile space. If you're in a waterfall team, that might not be the case, right?
Yes.
So I think you just need to think a little bit about what is the best for you and your organization.
Of course.
The quality coach, which is that concept of having one sort of tester for many teams, is very popular in Australia.
Oh, really?
Because we have Atlassian. Atlassian was one of the founders of that concept of quality coach. And so Atlassian's there, so everybody wants to follow what Atlassian is. It's a bit like the Spotify of testing, So I think one of the things that I say to people when they look at that model is it's hugely beneficial to help train developers in testing, because it's basically the developers are doing most of the testing at this point, right? Because you can't have one tester with 7 teams and the tester doing all the testing. It's really really hard. So
you need
the
testing,
developers,
it's really
you need to be coaching the developers on how to do testing, which is a great skill to have, and it's great for the developers too, who most of them, I believe, are passionate about quality, and it cuts back on that feedback loop, so you don't have to have that handing the bug to the developer, tester handing it to the developer, and the developer the developer's finding it and fixing it, so that's much faster. But I believe that there's nothing like having a tester who's able to identify problems. And the problem with having a quality coach is that over time you start to lose an idea of what the risks are, because you're not immersed in what the risks. So you can still do it really effectively, but you have to understand that maybe the depth of testing is not going to be quite as much as it would be if you had a tester on the team. That might be okay. That might not be the end of the world. If you're working, I had a really interesting conversation with a CEO from, I can't remember the name of but they had a fashion website, and millions and millions of people, but he basically said, look, we don't really care if our website goes down. It'll come up in 3 minutes. Our fans love the website. They're always going to buy clothes, and it's okay. We don't have to have a perfect website.
So it's about the expectations.
It's about
also
the expectations of your clients and what they want. So I think you have to think about all these little things that will impact your decision. And also, if you're a bank, you might not necessarily want to have a quality coach. It might be really important because of the risk profile. You're dealing with thousands of dollars of transactions, right? Are you really going to kind of be happy with a bit of shallow testing? So I think about all those different contexts and why would suit you, and be really definite about what your company values. Understand what quality means for your company, and then you can start making these sorts of decisions.
Yes.
Well, there you go.
No, thank you very much.
That's all right.
Yes, right on. Once again, thank you very much for your information and for your time.
Yeah.
Wonderful
talking
to
meet
you.
you. Yeah.
And I'll see you around.
Yeah, sure.
Thank
Okay.
you.